mean, you gotta hand it to her, like, love her or hate her. She knows how to make a good performance. What? Oh, I get it. You think that just because I start every single fucking video with some stupid meme or joke, this video also has to start with a joke? Well, you'd be probably right.
Did you hear that? Did you hear the piano? Are they able to hear that? It just went... I didn't play that, so that means that...
Yeah, surprise, surprise! I managed to see Taylor Swift on her Eras tour. How I was even able to do that in the first place is a secret that will be left between me and the demons I made a pact with in order to get the tickets for them in the first place. So I had always intended for this to be my next ranking video for a while now because of this concert, and because I thought it would be an interesting list to make considering how little I really know of this entire discography. But it kinda got stuck on the back burner between the videos I did at the beginning of the year, and especially after my last review got stuck in limbo. Watch my review of Uncharted, by the way, please. Now, I'm not gonna waste any time with backgrounds or introductions or anything like that here. It's Taylor fucking Swift. I don't need to introduce her to you. Every single thing this woman does finds some way to become a pop culture phenomenon, no matter how big or small it is. If you really don't know who or what I'm talking about, please tell me about what rock you've been living under at the bottom of the ocean this whole time, because I really need to know firsthand what it's like being roommates with Patrick Starr.
Who are you people?
Where are your fingers?
So for the longest time, I felt kind of neutral, I guess you could say, about Taylor Swift. I never disliked her music, but I've never loved it for the longest time. I thought she was, well, fine. She sort of blended in with a lot of other pop sensations throughout my life, whether it be from when I was that kid in middle school that said, yeah, I'm not like other kids, I listen to real music, while I pop in a Linkin Park or Imagine Dragons CD, or opposed to now where I almost exclusively keep to my alternative and indie bubbles with some A-list artists here and there. So in other words, nothing has changed except instead of popping in a Linkin Park CD, I'll put in Nate Wants to Battle on the aux cord, like that still makes my taste unique. I slowly started getting casually more interested in her stuff after Folklore came out, but it wasn't until Midnights came out that I decided to finally get a real taste of what her stuff was like. One, because I was like, why not? It's not that often I see everyone talking about an album like this collectively that much. And two, because I just wanted to see how it compared to another particular album that released the exact same day, knowing full well that album was going to be my favorite of the year anyways. And if you recall from my last end of the year list for 2022, I didn't think too highly of this record. So between that and being able to see her live in concert, it got me thinking, how is her other stuff? Outside of radio singles, my only other exposure to her stuff was 1989 and Some of Red. That was it. So that's what we're here for today. I'm gonna be listening to every single one of her albums, front to back, and ranking them from worst to best. Because this concert has given me a hell of a lot more respect for Taylor as an artist and as a performer, and if I'm going down the rabbit hole of inevitably selling my soul to becoming a Swiftie, I guess I gotta start somewhere. Now, I do need to make some disclaimers here before I get into this list. I will be ranking each album by their original track releases. There is already a lot to break down and dissect from 10 albums worth of music, and with work on this happening simultaneously with other videos I have coming, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to cover everything. So I'm not going to be covering any deluxe editions, I will not be covering bonus tracks or extended plays or anything of the sort, and yes, that includes Taylor's versions of her records and the vault tracks specifically. So as much as I would like to cover things such as bonus tracks like Bad Blood with Kendrick Lamar's feature, special tracks like Today Was a Fairy Tale, or vault tracks like I Can See You, I won't be doing that. Save for maybe one or two exceptions I'll talk about when I get to them. Could that make the reviews of these albums a little surface level? Most likely, but this is like 12 hours of music I have to analyze for this one video, and I really don't want this video getting stuck in limbo like my last one. You should watch my Uncharted video, by the way. Please, for the love of God, please, for the love of God, watch it. Now, I'll also go out of my way to say right now that if Taylor's version of a record exists, I highly recommend listening to that one. So, for the record, ha! That's a knee slapper! Ha! I listened to every version of every album for this list, including the original releases, just to see how different they are compared to Taylor's versions. But after that, I am never listening to these original releases again. And that also goes for when she eventually re-releases the rest of her albums. Look, I really don't care if Taylor is the biggest musician of our generation and has a metric fuck ton of money that she really doesn't need the revenue from her own versions. It's about the principle. This woman is the biggest pop star in the world, and her art was still stolen from her. I cannot and will not take away that original album experience from you, and neither should anyone else. Taylor literally said that herself at the concert I attended. But don't support a conglomerate mess if you can help it. Taylor's got balls of steel to do this, which I admired and respected a shit ton even before I started caring about her music. Artists deserve the right to their own work, and they deserve to be supported directly. So with all that said, at this point in writing the script, I have only listened to 2.5 records by Taylor total, not all 10. I have no idea how this list is going to go yet, but as a Greek philosopher once said, let's just jump into it. That was the dumbest joke I've ever made up for this fucking channel.
Wish I was back in Texas. The ocean.
I really hate country music. Like, really hate country music. I can probably count on, at most, one hand the number of songs I somewhat like that are country focused. Maybe one full album, and that's being forgiving. I've never liked anything about it. I've never liked the style. I've never liked the songwriting tropes. I've never liked the vocal tropes. I've never liked the instrumental tropes. I really cannot express enough how much I dislike this genre. Case in point, Taylor's first record. This was not easy to listen to. So much of what I hate about country music as a whole is displayed in this record, and it's so overbearing to me that I can't even look past it enough to appreciate Taylor's vocals on this entire thing. Is that incredibly biased? Yes. Do I care? Not really, sorry. I can't help that I can't stand this genre, and there's so many tropes here across the entire album. Any instrument you can think of that's played in a country fashion is played exactly how you would expect here. The violins, the banjos, I think there was a harmonica, I don't fucking know. I mean, credit where credit's due, Taylor does show herself off as a pretty talented vocalist and songwriter right out the get-go, with the entire album's general theming around youthfulness, which I guess makes sense since she was... Wait, how old was she when she made this? She recorded this when she was 16? Jesus fucking Christ. This woman has seen more success in her 20s than I'll see in my entire life. That was not smart. I am such a fucking lightweight, oh my god. So, funny story about my first listen of this. The version I listened to on Spotify wasn't actually the original version of this record and included all the bonus tracks without listing them as bonus tracks. Meaning I had to listen to this album way longer than I wanted to, and the only track I even remotely liked was Teardrops on My Guitar. And it wasn't even the original cut, it was the fucking pop cut. The only good song on this record is the only one that isn't a country song. What a fucking shock. I know I'm really hammering it in, but I'm sorry, I don't enjoy this genre of music at all, and Taylor's first record really personifies so much of what I dislike about country music. And to jump the gun here, so many of the ideas here that she has, they're much better fleshed out in Fearless. I know a re-recording of this album is inevitable sometime soon, and I'm curious to see how Taylor chooses to update these songs, but at the same time, I think there's a reason this album did not get its own quote-unquote era at the erastour outside of surprise songs here and there. It lacks a ton of identity outside the factoid that it's Taylor's first album. I really don't want to be too harsh since she was so young when she wrote this, and considering what comes next, it's honestly really impressive looking back that this was where it all started for her. But when I'm asking myself over and over when an album is going to end, that's not a good thing. Sorry to say, this wasn't for me, and it's easily Taylor's worst record.
Oh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me. There's not even a bass line, Taylor. Taylor's not even a bass line.
So while I do like Reputation a little more than her self-titled album, this record basically has the same problems that her self-titled album has, except this time in a mid-2010s pop sense. Now to its credit, there are songs here that I do like. Ready For It is a really badass opening track. Delicate is a fantastic synth pop treat to the ears. Gorgeous and Getaway Car aren't half bad songs. I do like the little interlude Taylor has towards the end of This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. And that's about it. The rest of the album, I could take it or leave it. I knew going into this record that some considered it the black sheep of her discography, and I get that now that I've listened to it. Because unlike other albums where it seemed like Taylor was setting pop trends, this album felt like she was following them, and not in a good way. The production of this record has mostly not aged well at all. You could go to any mainstream artist making this kind of pop, trap heavy music at the time, and most of them could do it much better than Taylor did. Look What You Made Me Do is a really melodramatic track. Endgame not only has a pretty mediocre feature from Future, but also committed the crime of giving me my second Ed Sheeran jump scare during my listening of all these albums. The rest of them, I really couldn't tell you much about how I feel. It's very indifferent because they all sound the same. When Taylor is leaning a bit more into the synth poppy tracks on the album, it's better, and considering what comes next, she probably knew that too. But the rest of the record reminds me of why I stopped caring about most pop music towards the end of the 2010s.
And our vengeance shall be swift.
So, as I've established, I don't like country music, and believe me, I know I'm treading an even thinner line here than her self-titled, because even I know how big of a deal this album is. Fearless really did revolutionize the genre, and in some ways the entire music industry. It won Taylor her first Grammy for Album of the Year. Every country singer and band at the time through my 9-year-old filter sounded like they were trying to do what Taylor did with this album. It's hard for me to really explain, especially since I was so young, but I remember there was a clear distinction in country and pop music before and after this album came out. Some of these songs were all over the radio when I was really young, and they never stopped playing them. You could not escape how big this album was at the time. And in that sense, I absolutely have to give it and Taylor credit. So what is my own personal take on the album? It's fine. I'm kind of indifferent to it as well. I thought You're Not Sorry, Forever and Always, and the final track Change were all decent, but at the same time, I started laughing when I heard Tell Me Why open with its violins. Like, I genuinely cannot take this genre seriously. I think the reason I'm mostly indifferent rather than love or hate on this album is because of the clear pop influence this album has. The tracks are a lot more tolerable to me personally because some of them don't really sound like cliche country songs. Not to mention Taylor's songwriting on this album is a definite improvement over her first record. And then there's some of the famous tracks here. Fearless, 15, Love Story, You Belong With Me. I mean, what can I say? These are all good songs. Taylor's vocals harmonize perfectly with her songwriting and instrumentation. I don't know if I would call any of these among my favorites, but me even liking these tracks to begin with is a feat for me. I mean, Love Story and You Belong With Me have to be doing something right if I can still vividly remember most of their lyrics, even all these years later. Although that could have something to do with how overplayed they were too. Remember, this album was fucking everywhere in the late 2000s. Not my favorite, but it's got some good songs, and I can see and respect the impact it had on the music industry at the time.
Morning to you.
Why are you gay?
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay.
So this album was kind of weird for me because I had a general idea of what the public thought of every record Taylor put out before this, but Lover, I had no idea what to expect whatsoever. And what did I get? Well, on paper, it seems like it could be worse than Reputation before it. Most of the album is very lax and underwritten, and you could argue the songwriting on this is Taylor's weakest compared to what she's done before and after. But honestly, I don't really mind that. Lover is incredibly fun and easygoing. Songs like Cruel Summer and Lover, on a surface level, don't seem to really take themselves too seriously. The melodies and instrumentation on songs like False God and Afterglow are really well produced. Remember when I said Reputation sounded better when Taylor leaned more into a synth pop sound instead of what was popular? Lover feels like the answer to that. It feels like I'm listening to a Carly Rae Jepsen or Church's album in a few ways, and if you've watched my previous videos, you know how much I love those artists. Is it nearly as good as those artists or any other synth pop heavy artists right now? Probably not, but it's still a style that I really appreciate hearing on this album. And I mean, on top of that, it isn't still afraid to touch on deeper issues here and there too. I mean, there's a reason You Need to Calm Down is considered an LGBTQ bop. I think this entire album can be best summed up by the track Me featuring Brendan Urie, who is honestly one of Taylor's better features in her career.
Am I a cat?
The entire song is really fun, laid back, and easy on the ears. It doesn't take itself too seriously, even when it's talking about the serious stuff. It can lack a bit of substance at times, but I think the style more than makes up for it. This one wasn't half bad.
Hey, Joey, do you want to eat me?
No thanks, Mr. Muffin.
But I want to die.
Alright, so I'll admit in retrospective, I was a little harsh when putting Midnight's among my worst albums of 2022 last year. And now, especially after listening to 2 records by Taylor that I actively dislike, Jesus fucking Christ, I take it all back now. This album was already growing on me over time, but after going through all of her stuff, I appreciate what this album was doing a lot more than before. Antihero is among my favorite tracks Taylor has ever put out. The way she addresses so many issues with mental health in this is delivered so fantastically. Karma is such a fun pop tune from an instrumental and melody perspective. The production on the song Bejeweled is fucking phenomenal. Just from a production standpoint, this is one of the best synth pop songs I've ever heard. Granted, I still wouldn't call this album perfect. I'm not entirely on board with how You're On Your Own and Maroon are composed. I'm not too crazy on Lana Del Rey's feature on Snow on the Beach. And the production on some of the tracks like Midnight Rain are, well, to put it bluntly, not good. But the writing is still what carries a lot of these tracks. Even when the album is sonically at its worst or most average, the lyrics are among the best across Taylor's entire career. Some tracks have even grown on me over time, like Lavender Haze and Vigilante Shit. I really wish I didn't put this in my worst list last year, or hell, put it in the list at all without really considering all of this. Is this my favorite record from Taylor? No, I still don't think it's perfect, but I appreciate a lot more what it was trying to say and do than I did when I first listened to it. It treads a lot of familiar territory, but Taylor's songwriting skills are some of her best on this album, and when a song on here is good, it's really fucking good.
The windows are dark in the town, child. The whales huddle down in the deep. I'll read you one very last book if you swear you'll go the fuck to sleep.
So when it comes to Taylor's folk duology, COVID albums, story-based records, sister records, I don't know, someone tell me there's a proper way to describe both of these albums. Evermore was definitely the lesser of the two for me. Not to say that I dislike it, because I really do like it, actually. I'll talk about this a little more later on, but these two albums, to me, are the best written albums across Taylor's entire career. The shift in focus she takes on these records from her more autobiographical style to basically telling a whole collection of stories was not only a breath of fresh air, but Taylor's really fucking good at writing stories. Willow and Champagne Problems are among some of Taylor's best songs to date. I love how relaxed Willow is and how grounded Champagne Problems is in their respective deliveries. Gold Rush and Evermore with Bon Iver gleefully caught me off guard with how quickly they change pace in the middle of their songs. Long Story Short is a really well produced alt tune, and I love the lyrics on Dorothea and 'Tis the Damn Season. There is a lot to love here. There are some bits that I don't necessarily love either though. Some songs such as Cowboys Like Me go back to a country influence. I don't think I need to elaborate any more on this. No Body, No Crime was honestly a little disappointing. I was really hoping to hear more of a vocal feature from Haim since I've really loved their work before, but they really take a huge backseat in this area. Closer is one of the weirdest songs I've ever listened to. The production on it sounds like Charlie XCX and Gorillaz had a fight, and in the middle of it, Taylor started singing out of fear and confusion. And the album overall feels a little bit surface level. I hate to describe it that way because it's anything but. There's a lot of depth to this record when it comes to the writing side of things. Maybe I was getting fatigued by this point. Full disclosure, this was the last record I listened to front to back for this ranking video, but it doesn't seem to have quite the same punch its sister record had before. It's an album I have a lot of respect for given its instrumental nature. It's not every day you see such a mainstream artist release two records back to back that are this radically different from what you'd expect. I just don't think it sticks to landing quite as hard as Folklore does. And we'll get into that soon enough.
And act like you belong here.
Ah, perfect. Well, hi there, I'm a cowboy.
So I'll reiterate, even though I'm sure you're sick of hearing it, I hate country music. I really disliked Taylor's debut album. I felt mostly indifferent to Fearless despite acknowledging how big of a deal it was. I didn't like Evermore bringing some of it back. So it probably sounds absolutely shocking when I bring up Speak Now, another one of Taylor's more prominently country-focused albums, and tell you that for the majority of this entire album, listening to it in my free time, my eyes and ears were fucking glued to my phone and stopped everything to pay attention to most of the songs here. What? Didn't see that one coming, did you? Speak Now is good. It's actually really, really good. So good that I think this might be the first time I have ever actually enjoyed a country album. This record turned my whole fucking world upside down. Like, what is happening? Mine is a banger of an opening track. Sparks Fly is an amazing song. Back to December is one of Taylor's best songs she's ever written. Okay, I already knew that one going in, but Speak Now is also fantastic. Dear John's lyrics are incredible. Me and Story of Us have incredible vocal flow and instrumentation. So many of the songs on this thing are so fucking good. What on earth is fucking happening? Am I freeing myself from the Matrix? Did the world actually end in 2012 and I'm just now waking up from a simulation? Is this what it feels like going through the blood ritual of becoming a swiftie? The answer to two of those three questions is yes. success, and I'll leave it up to you to decide which ones. Now, I didn't love every second of this album. The last third of this album kind of lost me with songs like Innocent, Haunted, Last Kiss, and Long Live. It did kind of feel like the album was starting to lose steam at that point, but my god, these tracks blew my mind with how much I ended up actually enjoying them. Could you amount this to the more pop-infused country style that started in Fearless and gets better on this album? Probably. But to me, there's two things that stick out with Speak Now. First, the writing. This is the earliest record where I think Taylor's songwriting abilities are at their best. She made this album entirely by herself, and what we have is such an impressive lineup of songs and lyrics from someone who would have been about 20 when these were written. The other is just the overall energy of the album. For the first 2/3 of this album, Taylor doesn't really sound like she's on autopilot like her debut, or on cruise control like in Fearless. On Speak Now, Taylor isn't even driving a fucking car, she's driving a goddamn train, like it's on full speed from Spider-Man 2. The best way I can describe it is the overall flow of the record is infectious. Taylor is taking you for a ride, and it's one I'm actually glad I went on. I think it's going to take some time as to whether or not this album will either change my perception on country music as a whole, or if this album is just a rare golden exception. But for now, I'm still blown away and really impressed that this is now the first golden exception I've listened to in this genre. It is a crime that this album hasn't been celebrated more on her Eras tour, and I'm hoping that changes now that her version of it is now out.
What the?
So I'll say right off the bat, outside of my number one, ranking these next two was hard. And I mean really, really hard. This is the point where most of the songs on these albums I rarely skip out on, and honestly, this spot in number 2 could be interchangeable in a lot of ways. So I settled for a single reason for putting Red at number 3 instead of 2 and definitely below 1. The next two albums didn't give me an Ed Sheeran jump scare. When I think of Taylor Swift and her music, the effect she has on pop culture, and how incredibly big and popular her music is, this is one of 2 of her albums that immediately come to mind. If you were to ask me, even before I made this list, what songs from Taylor I did like or really like, there's a good chance I would pick songs from this album or another one I'll talk about soon. I Knew You Were Trouble, 22, We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together. These were massive pop anthems during my youth, even more so than the songs Taylor had put out beforehand. And I'm really happy to say that the entire album is just as quality. Red is a tremendous album from start to finish. Almost every single song on this record feels like it could chart on the radio. The vocals, the songwriting, the instrumentation, the production, the melodies, all of it is absolutely fan-fucking-tastic. State of Grace is one of the best openings I've ever listened to on an album, and it never lets up from there. Red, Treacherous, All Too Well, I Almost Do, Holy Ground, The Lucky One, Starlight. It's so hard for me to describe how I feel about every single one of these tracks right here and now, because all of them do the same things with such unbelievable success. Taylor's vocals are constantly energetic and have a godly flow to them. The lyrics are catchy as hell. The instrumentation, production, and melodies perfectly blend all these genres from pop to folk to indie to, yes, even a bit of country. And you might be thinking, Aquarius, aren't you contradicting yourself then? Doesn't that make 2 country-esque records that you now really like? And to that I say, shut up for a sec, it's a pop album. Even some of the tracks here that I think are a bit weaker are still great earworms. Stay, Stay, Stay doesn't have too much going on, but it's got a catchy hook to it. Begin Again is an elegant closing track. Sad, Beautiful, Tragic sounds a bit backseated compared to the rest of the slower tunes on this album, but is still pretty nice. Pretty much the only song on this entire record that I don't really care for is Everything Has Changed. And yeah, I've joked a lot about Ed Sheeran, but sorry, I don't like him. This song sounds like he somehow managed to drop one of his own tracks on what is otherwise an unbelievably fantastic pop album. Like a processed slow song to get the kids at prom to slow dance like most of Ed's discography is. It's a small blemish on what is otherwise honestly now up there with some of my favorite albums. I really cannot believe there are 2 more albums after this that I think are better. And I know this is kind of breaking my rules a little bit, but you know what? Actually, I'm not sorry. Let's talk about the 10-minute version of All Too Well for a second. While Folklore was where I first started to show a bit of genuine interest, I think this song is what ultimately caused my slow but eventual rabbit hole that is now the video you're watching now. I don't really have the words to express how impressive it is that Taylor was able to write a song that is this long and have it be this consistently engaging the entire time. There is never a dull moment, and it never feels like it's actually 10 minutes long. The short film for it is also one of the best music videos I've ever seen, and between watching it and seeing the behind the scenes for it recently, made me realize between this video and the I Can See You video that just came out recently, I might get a bit of flack from people outside of Taylor's bubble for saying this, but Taylor Swift is a really good director. Like, good enough that I'd honestly like to see her try to direct a movie or something outside of her own musically inclined ideas. It sounds absolutely crazy, I know, but I and so many other people have been surprised by the people you'd least expect being some of the best directors out there. I can see why so many people generally consider Red to be Taylor's best album, objectively speaking, borderline her magnum opus. It really wowed me, and it continues to wow me with every subsequent listen. If this album didn't turn me into a fan of hers, the next two certainly did.
Play the forbidden note.
So, here we are, the final two. You've done the process of elimination, you know which albums are left. Now it's just a matter of which one I like more than the other. So, with that in mind, the number 2 spot goes to Folklore. I really don't want to say the difference between Folklore and Evermore is night and day, since I still think Evermore is a decent album, but man, it doesn't even come close to how good Folklore is. So, are there any negatives here? Well, I'm not super crazy about the song Exile, and I'm indifferent to Bon Iver's feature on it. That's it. Wow. That's actually it. Folklore is one of the most beautifully written albums I've ever listened to. The decision Taylor made here to tell a handful of stories rather than be her traditionally autobiographical self was not only a refreshing change of pace, but the poetic nature of this album is immaculate. Whether it be from the really fucked up themes of the track 7, the struggles with mental health and addiction on This Is Me Trying, or the love triangle of the songs August, Betty, and Cardigan. Oh my god, some of Taylor's best work yet. Even before I started getting into Taylor last fall, Cardigan was a song I had in my playlists. It might have been my favorite song from Taylor had it not been for another track I'll talk about soon enough. The way the vocals on this track increase in casual intensity and how the overall song crescendos into something bigger is a delight to the ears. Pretty much every track is structured like this, and every time it still floors me. You know how every Mission Impossible film does that trick with face masks in every entry and it still somehow manages to surprise you every time you see it in any of the movies? That's what every song on this record feels like. The structure is so predictable, but somehow it just works because of how phenomenal the lyricism is across the entire record. There's so much to unpack on this album. The theming on Last Great American Dynasty, the lyrics on Mad Woman, My Tears Ricochet, Mirrorball. There's so many ways to interpret all of these songs. I honestly think out of all these records, this is the only one I could do its own video on, which I'm not gonna do because I've already listened to a lot of Taylor, and I mean a lot. This album is an actual work of art. There are so many ways to approach consuming this record and what your takeaways are from it, even when they're as blunt as the Love Triangle songs. I don't get that feeling from any of Taylor's other records, not even Evermore, which feels a bit more straightforward. I know this album being Taylor's 3rd Grammy win for Album of the Year was seen as a safe choice at the time, especially given some of the competition, but looking back, I think it was well earned. It's not every day that I walk away from an album genuinely thinking about it this much and what it could all mean. I really mean it when I say it's a work of art. And that leads into what you might be thinking. If that's how I feel about Folklore, how on earth could I possibly feel the number 1 here is better?
It's so beautiful.
"1989 is fucking flawless. Remember when I said earlier that if you asked me what songs I liked from Taylor when I was younger, I was likely to pick songs from Red? Yeah, I'd be way more likely to pick songs from 1989. This album, even before I did this list and listened to everything, was what I always associated Taylor with. And listening to the album now, it's honestly bizarre how much I actually loved this record as a teenager without really knowing it. Shake It Off felt like one of the best dance songs ever made at the time it came out. Blank Space, Wildest Dreams, and Bad Blood were always great to hear on the radio. Style, up until Cardigan, was the only Taylor Swift song for a while I could tell you I genuinely loved as a teenager. So when I finally listened to the entire album on a whim about a month or two after listening to Midnights, this was the album that got me. This is the album that hooked me and got me interested in seeing Taylor live in the first place. This album is like if you took the entire vibe of Lover, combined it with the production of something like that in Midnights, the vocals of Red, and the more straightforward writing style of Evermore, and injected it with fucking steroids. There is not a single song on this entire record that I'm even indifferent to. None of these are skips. I love the bombastic opening of Welcome to New York. I love the in-your-face poppy production and melodies on All You Had to Do Was Stay and I Wish You Would. I love the chill, quiet aesthetic on songs like Clean and This Love. Did I mention the production on I Know Places and How You Get the Girl? Have I mentioned the production enough on this album already? This album's production is fucking insane with how good it is. All the pops, the beats, the melodies, they're all so fucking good and well made. And even though the writing is arguably not as strong and the focus is definitely more style over substance, the album isn't afraid to at least cover different topics, like how Shake It Off is just an anthem for not letting the negativity get to you. And even the simplest ideas on the record are delivered in such creative ways on the songs Bad Blood and Wildest Dreams. They're simple on the surface, but their complexity comes from how these simple lyrics harmonize with such an elegant sound. And that leads me to Out of the Woods, one of the best songs I have ever heard, and easily my favorite song by Taylor Swift. The production on it is perfect. Taylor's songwriting abilities are at their best with the storytelling and imagery going on with it. Her vocals are incredible. The instrumentation and production, I cannot express enough how fucking good the production on this is. The audiophile in me loves hearing every second of this album. It's synth pop and modern pop at its absolute best, and it's what I think most pop music should strive to be. And like Fearless, there was a pretty distinct change in pop music before and after this record came out. I think the only other pop album that I can think of that everyone was trying to replicate other than this at the time was Emotion by Carly Rae Jepsen. It's a pop album that calls back to the best of the genre from the 80s and the 90s, but modernizes it in a way that has never really been done before. It really doesn't surprise me that much that this was Taylor's second Grammy win for Album of the Year. Just like Fearless for country music, this album was one of a few at the time that set the standard for pop music. It's albums like these that people look back on and recognize as tentpole records. Like I said, when I used to think of Taylor Swift, it was the singles from this album I would usually think of first, and now it still is. Could you argue that almost every album Taylor puts out is a tentpole in some way? Yeah. Are there albums that are better written, like Folklore? Totally. Are there albums that are, objectively speaking, more fitting to be called her best, like Red or Fearless? Absolutely. But if you ask me, 1989 is perfect not only because of its tentpole status, but because of how balanced of an album it is. It has a little bit of everything that makes Taylor such a massive icon in the music industry. It gives you a taste of her writing skills, it gives you a taste of her vocal styles, it gives you a taste of her diligence in her instrumentation and production, and honestly, more than anything else, it's just a really fun record to listen to. The most fun I have listening to any of her albums. I don't have to think too deeply about this album like I would Red or Folklore, but I also don't think it's brain dead like Reputation, or inconsistent like Midnights, or loses steam like Speak Now. Let me put it this way. Look at how I'm filming these shots during the Eras concert across her different performances. They're all really calm and relaxed, so I can get good and decent shots of what's happening. Look at how uncontrollable my camera looks when Shake It Off is being performed. This album never gets old to me. It could have single-handedly put Taylor among my most listened to artists on Spotify over enough time. Granted, that's now the case because I made this video, but if I haven't driven the point home enough yet, 1989 is not only Taylor Swift's best record, it's one of the best albums I've ever listened to. And there's a good chance that I'm stopping a lot while editing this portion just so I can listen to the songs on it again and again and again. I haven't really been one for going crazy for Taylor's versions of her albums, but you can bet your ass I'll be going crazy when she releases 1989 in the hopefully not so distant future, and I will not apologize for the person I might be when that moment comes. Now, I'm almost positive this list will be contentious. If there's anything that Taylor Swift fans are, it's passionate about what they love. And if being a Sonic the Hedgehog fan for over 15 years or a Last of Us fan since Part 2 has taught and shown me anything, people can get really passionate. So let me know in the comments below what you think and how you'd rank Taylor's albums and or what you think of each album. And while you're at it, be sure to like and subscribe. I make videos like this talking about cool media stuff that I like across movies, shows, music, and games. If you subscribe right now, I will go back in time, buy Big Machine Records, I'll sell Taylor her old masters for her for the low price of free, and I don't fucking know. I'll give it to her for low price of free as long as she promises not to be in fucking Cats. Fucking save yourself, dear God.